Yeah, hello everybody, and I hope you enjoyed the music. So warm welcome from my side. Thanks to all of you for taking your time and joining us today in our virtual panel discussion. So my name is Jannis Stemmann from CyberCompare, and I'm really honored and thrilled to have our three special guests, our guest speakers today, and I'm going to shortly introduce them to you also. So coming from left to right, at least on my screens here, Ralf Garrecht. So Ralf is Chief Information Security Officer for Fresenius. I think Fresenius, all of you know, right, is one of the largest corporates in the world. So about 300,000 employees, global leadership in, for example, healthcare, hospitals, pharma, medical technology. And Ralf also has a very distinguished career already in IT under his belt. So previously worked, for example, with Nord Stream and BASF, and really great to have you with us today, Ralf. Thanks a lot. And then next upcoming, we have John Grunnen. So John is Vice President and globally responsible for IT at Hurtigruten in Norway. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. And I think Hurtigruten is a really fascinating company, very special, right? So you have about 2,000 employees and operating coastal shipping routes. So shipping in Norway for passenger cruises, but also mail and cargo. And John also has a very long and successful career in consulting behind him already. And you also were the recovery lead for Hurtigruten during a cyber attack. So thank you very much, John, for taking the time today. Really great to have you with us. And then we have Bartek Blaicke, right? So actually called Bartek, formerly Bartosz. And Bartek is the Chief Information Security Officer for Refresco. So it's a Dutch giant in the beverage industry. I read that you're producing about 12 billion liters of beverages every year, so it's amazing. And Refresco, I think, is also the worldwide largest independent bottler at all, right, of beverages. About 10,000 employees. And I'm personally surprised that Bartek still has some hair on his head because he worked for 10 years for McKinsey, of course, also in the cybersecurity practice there. So thank you very much for joining, Bartek. Really fantastic. With this then, I'm supposed to tell you also that we will be running some polls today. Yeah, so it will be kind of interactive and immersive. So I hope you have your phones ready, but not for reading emails, at least not during the session, right, but for participating in the polls. And also, of course, just like the last time, right, feel free to ask any questions during the panel discussion. So it's basically we just type them in the Q&A box next to the screen, and the questions then will be monitored, answered as much as possible during the event. And then, of course, later on after the panel discussion, we'll also have fireside chats upcoming. So let's maybe start with the first topic. So challenges and trends in the cybersecurity industry. So maybe starting with you, Ralf, right? So which challenges do you see coming up right now? Also maybe especially from your own experience, right? So coming from the general and more going to the more specific. What is your perspective there?
Yeah, thanks for the question and thanks for having me. Challenges. The best answer is probably a few. So I mean, obviously, cyber attack surface expands not only because of remote work increases and commercial supply chains are being digitalized and there's more cloud usage. Next to that, you know, we also have, let's say, some development in the threat landscape. I mean, obviously, we're all aware of ransomware, not only the starting point of encrypting stuff, but now talking about triple or quadruple extortions, and this is probably becoming a most common type of attack. Yeah, not saying that we're also, let's say, in our sector having some touch points with these nice friends. And also critical infrastructure becomes more digitalized and exposed to cyber attacks with with a focus on OT. And if you look at that companies potentially still do not fully know their dynamic attack surface and footprint, however, further digitalizing, but building a strong foundation of resilience and secure architecture is still often overlooked. I think that is in summary good starting point of challenges we have.
Already enough on the plate, exactly. So maybe now we try the polling function, and to ask you in the audience, what do you see as some of the biggest challenges right now? So I think you should see a QR code now. Hopefully this is more or less self-explanatory and also works smoothly. Otherwise, just let us know. So let's have a look at the result. I think the first time always takes a bit longer, right, until everybody basically is set up there. Cool, it works. So looks like, yeah, backup management and secure access in the context of remote work. Yeah, and then close by, identity risk, OT monitoring, legacy system. Of course, there are legacy systems, especially for industrial control systems, OT. So some fine tuning, but looks like almost everything is very important, huh, in security. So I think before actually the panel discussion, we also had a similar poll in the LinkedIn community, and maybe let's also have a look at those results to just compare them quickly. And yeah, also they are not surprising, right? So secure remote access is one of the key topics, right? Next to the others also mentioned by the audience right now, like backup management. Maybe John, from your side, what is your view, right? Remote work, maybe also what was the experience at Großen during the pandemic? What were some actions which you took? What is your current view on security for remote access?
Yeah, thank you for having me here. And I'll try to answer my best. I think the new normal hit us and everybody else overnight, and it did create some challenges. In particular, the scaling of secure remote access solutions, VPN servers, virtualization environments, and the performance of it was something we struggled with. We had limited access based on physical location parameters, and we had local distribution of secure client image. Now these suddenly became less relevant. We must remember that this was a time of uncertainty, and everyone felt stressed not knowing what was around the corner. So this also creates an opportunity for a hacker, as it becomes more difficult for us to communicate this is official and this is not an official thing. And everyone in this period tried to help themselves, which also meant introducing new services, maybe under the radar, on the side, and we're, as IT, running after them to try to integrate them and make sure they are safe. When people are in this situation and we're trying to onboard the new digital meeting conference tools or new digital tools remotely, sitting at their own home, trying to get help via phone or via digital tools, this becomes challenging. And remember here that we're a company with employees spread out globally. We have ships all over the place, from Antarctica to Arctica to all around the American coasts and in Norway as well. And when we got this message and when the pandemic hit us, then suddenly our crew was unable to travel home. They were stuck on our ship. And that increases the need and the desperation for them to get in touch with the loved ones at home, which again then opens up for a hacker taking an advantage of that and trying to fool them through phishing or tailored attacks.
Understand. And Bartek, from your side, any special points maybe also, what are essential steps which you have taken or which you would recommend in order to secure remote access?
Yeah, sure. There are a few, but first of all, let me also thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be among the group and have this discussion. And I think all of us, as part of that shift to remote work, for all the organizations that did not have, let's say, MFA in place or proper authentication of the users, I think that was together with scaling up VPN connectivity. Those were some of the things that many of the organizations ramped up as everyone embraced that sudden remote work mode. And that's been, I think, one of the key elements that should be in place already. But thinking of that kind of long term, also making sure that the MFA is user friendly, because there are different ways to make it happen in enforced security, but some of them are more difficult for the user than others. So the initial phase, as John mentioned, was a quick scale up, and it was all about making sure we are as secure as possible because the hackers were taking advantage. But as the things stabilize, we should also think of the other part of the equation. Then I think the VPN is probably the second thing worth mentioning. And specifically for the OT environment, I think a lot of the companies focus on the employee access, but in OT for us and factories and plants, we do have a lot of third-party suppliers, vendors that need to keep access to the production lines and the equipment. And that's also a VPN access or direct access into the environment that needs to be properly secured. And sometimes some of those consultants came in physically. Now they can do it, but those maintenance elements need to happen. So operations engineering teams also need to be involved and make sure that they provide that proper secure access rather than just open something up because it's easy, but that will introduce more threats into the environment. And I think last but not least, as everyone works from home on their laptops, on their mobiles, the endpoint security also needs to scale beyond the office. Like historically, we had the firewall, the perimeter that could control the traffic, filter what's coming in. Now you need to have the same type of capabilities on individual endpoints and control use mobile device management on your mobile devices, have policy enforcement elements on the endpoints, or even going all the way to, let's say, EDR, auto patching, and making sure that the reaction time there are also as quick as possible.
Great. Thanks a lot for sharing these insights. Maybe Ralf, from your side, right? I think one aspect of security is also to share responsibility, right? So not to make this only an IT event, basically, but to include employees or involve our employees and colleagues there. Any thoughts on this? What is the best way to do this?
There's probably not this just one way of doing it. However, I think employees need to understand, or companies need to understand, that security is everybody's job, full stop. Yeah. We, for example, we manage people as an own so-called risk domain next to enterprise IT, OT, IoT, product security, operations of health facilities. And I think employees must understand that they can make a fundamental difference, being aware of their role in the overall concept. Yeah. So if we look, for instance, as we said, one of the main issues or challenges we have is the increasing number of ransomware attacks. And next to RDP as a technical entry point, phishing, for instance, was the #1 entry point for ransomware. So this is basically why you really need to take care of employees, as they can be a very helpful sensor to detect behavior or suspicious behavior very early in the kill chain. I would even go that far to say not addressing employees or people in a cybersecurity program today is, to my mind, gross negligent.
Understand. Yeah, good point. Well, let's maybe move on to the next topic or the next agenda point, right? So top basic protective measures. So we're coming from the more basic stuff to the more advanced stuff. And yeah, maybe John, from your perspective, right? What are, I know generalizations are always difficult, but what are, from your point of view, the top basic protective measures in terms of security?
Good question, and it's a huge question because of what's basic, what's advanced here. But if you're referring to kind of only the top ones, there are probably statistics on this, but I would say, as Ralf mentioned, employee awareness, training and tracking, setting the right processes in place to make sure that you're not only pushing the training, but they're actually doing it, and that you're following up if they're not done right. Otherwise, you'll come nowhere. Then next, patch management and vulnerability scanning, making sure that you're on top at all time, have the right processes to patch as quickly as required, have a full understanding of your environment there. That leads me to the next one, I would say, is asset and risk management. If you understand what you have and understand what you need and understand what risk you're facing, then you're in a way better position than if you're not. Next, network segmentation. Try to limit what an attacker can get access to, slow down lateral movements, try to make it difficult to navigate in your system if that person is there. Definitely worth a look. And then at last, proper access management solutions. We talked about MFA or things like that. That should be quite basic, in my opinion. So that's what I would call the first line of defense.
Super. Thank you very much for your perspective, John. Yeah, then let's use this opportunity to start our second poll. So question to you in the audience also, right? What do you see personally as your most effective basic security controls, right? What is basically, yeah, must have for everybody? So you know that in Germany, we are currently learning statistics about Corona via our newspapers. So I think it's also a good opportunity for me here to get used to some statistics. So interesting. So employee awareness ranks very high. If I have a look at this, network segmentation on second place, patch management, third place. Yeah, some asset inventory, right? Asset inventory, I think also quite important, as John just mentioned, right? If you don't know that you have it, you cannot manage it. Good, but looks like awareness training and of course, you know, success controls like phishing campaigns and so on are ranking #1. And I think also for this, right, we brought some data from a broader base, if I'm not mistaken. So let's maybe also have a look at this. From, I think in that case, it's from CyberCompare diagnostics benchmark, right, where we also see, and we can confirm that many companies struggle with employee awareness, right, next to other security controls, right, or general risk management, cyber risk management, so also consequence-based, but awareness training, phishing campaigns, or like also telephone phishing or smishing is always something which is missing very often, and that also many companies are talking about at the moment. So, Bartek, from your point of view, right, do you have, what is your view? What is also your experience with employee awareness? Why is it so important as a protective measure?
Yeah, I think the colleagues already mentioned that it's one of the key vectors that is used as initial compromise quite often. And I think when we think of security awareness, it's at the heart of kind of a people element or even a mindset change aspect to it. As I think John mentioned.
At least I cannot hear you at the moment, Bartek. Maybe Ralf, anything to add from your side until Bartek comes back online? So we hope the remote access was not hacked.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah. Well, I can share a few thoughts. You know, I think one element I think an element we still need to consider is that our cybersecurity programs and the understanding that cyber is first and foremost some technical issue, which needs a tech answer, is probably one of the reasons why we are still not paying the attention to employee awareness as we probably should do, or as we need to do. There's a few other reasons, like constraints. At least I know that from several German organizations. I know of that employee representatives, workers' councils and stuff are not always in favor of phishing contests and the like. It's difficult to get there doing the measuring, and well, if we then look into what we are doing, I also believe sometimes it's also not tangible enough to make people understand what difference they can make if following key behaviors. And I believe personally that most program setups are not tailored to the staff. They are not not target oriented enough, and considering the training and the awareness level of individuals. I think this is basically one of the things we need to address. For instance, an engineer needs a different type of awareness than an office worker. Yeah. So if I have somebody working in a plant and a pharmaceutical factory, or somebody who is programming software for a medical device, needs a different level of awareness. And my last point I probably can share is, the regular training and repetition is also sometimes lacking, where we need to, or where we can improve. This one-shot approach does not work.
Very good. I think also, especially for shop floor workers, right? So you need very specialized trainers. Yeah, absolutely. Bartek, great that we have you back. Any other thoughts to add on this topic?
I would had to drop out for a second, but I would like to second that regular training aspect, because I think historically it was like once a year e-learning with 20, 30 slides that everyone kind of click next. Yes, I'm fully aware. I'll behave, and then they forget about it. And we've actually also moved to a monthly training, specifically on a project, combined with communications like newsletters, posters, with a theme of a month, like phishing, strong passwords, etc., and then related phishing campaigns or phishing simulations on top of that, so that security aspect comes up at least on a monthly basis for people. It's not something that like they will hear about if they read the news or if they need to do their yearly compliance training. So I think that made a difference to move the needle on the people change.
Yeah. You know what? I think we in this room, and I guess probably also everybody in the audience, right? We're on the same page and we all agree, right? But we also, honestly, we are talking to a lot of customers, head of IT, CIO, chief information security officers, and they have difficulty convincing their board of management of increasing the cybersecurity budgets, right? For example, for awareness training, phishing campaigns. Any thoughts or any advice or on how to approach this topic? Maybe John or whoever wants to pitch in.
Yeah, I can answer that. I think for us, we had a real attack. So, okay, it might be different, but before or after, there is something about understanding the impact of a disaster, an event. And here is where the risk management come in. If you do proper risk management and you analyze together with the team what could be the impact, it's quite easy to get an eye opener here and say, okay, if this is the impact, is this a situation we're willing to be in, or should we do the measures to work against that to reduce the probability of that happening? So I think risk management is extremely important in the communication with the business.
Yeah, to build on that, I think the risk management will also having risk registers and having those discussions with the business to make them aware that this is not IT or security asking for more budgets because they just want to have a new fancy tool. But having those discussions around like this is a legacy system sitting in the middle of the production location. If that goes down, potentially a couple of lines will not be able to manufacture the product for X amount of time. That means a loss of revenue for that time, and that you make it really tangible and even go more towards risk-based or risk quantification, where you can say the cost of the control is X, the potential loss of revenue or reputational damage, etc., is Y, and then you have that very real discussion: do we really not want to spend that little or that much to cover that risk? Because ultimately, it's a business decision. If they're willing to accept that certain level of risk, then it's we can provide as much facts and debate about it, but the business ultimately decides.
Yeah, if I can chime in here, I think also risk management is a good starting point, and basically it should be at the core of what we do. However, as risk is not an exact kind of science, or risk management is not an exact kind of science, you cannot exactly tell what will happen and when it will happen and what will be the impact. However, there's more methodology to be put on this side, but this also requires investments, right, and efforts and stuff and the like. I bet, and I'm coming from a time when security, or started in security, let's say, when we did not have everyday attacks and impacts. We can read that from the general press. And what I believe is still helping is making it tangible, right? Showing it, doing red team assessments, doing some real risk assessments, showing people, that their credentials are stolen, and then use them and show, let's say, in a showcase kind of environment, that what could happen, very tangible to a company itself. Honestly, I believe this is potentially the best way of getting out of the situation, to be always in this pretender mode, and always react only when something happens. I think we need to look at cybersecurity more in a strategic way, not in a reactive way. And this is only the only way I found, to be honest, is showing it and making it tangible.
Yeah, I think, Ralf, this is extremely interesting, right? Because I also think that for a head of IT, it's really difficult to explain what will be the likelihood reduction of an attack, right? So by how much will you reduce the likelihood of an attack by introducing a new security control, right? And using a penetration test or a team or so sometimes really helps. That's absolutely clear. Maybe also a question to all three of you, right? If any thoughts come to mind. I mean, we all know, right, that the security budgets in general across all companies are increasing. So there might be some exceptions for individual companies, but in general, security budgets go up every year. At the same time, number of attacks or severity of attacks is not going down, it's also increasing. So what does this mean? I mean, are all those security controls in the end not effective, or?
I try and answer. This is an evolving kind of environment, and it's highly dynamic. I think we just need to accept that. And we are always talking, and you also, Yannis, had the question, what kind of baseline security measures do you need to put in place? And ask that question, just in your mind. Just ask that question 20 years ago. Maybe a firewall and an antivirus would be a good solution, right? Would be a good baseline. As of today, I think we all agree this is not. So 10 years ago, I was discussing, and I think, John, you said that, MFA, how difficult this is, and it's a very advanced kind of measure. It's a baseline measure today. So everything which is it's seen as an advanced measure today is a baseline tomorrow. I think we just need to accept that. Security was always said is to be seen, not to be seen as a project, but as a process. I would disagree. Today, I would say it's to be seen as a product. And there's a good analogy probably to the car industry. We have more cars on the street, we have more traffic, but we still have, and this is how we need to see that, we have less dead people because we were also investing at the same time in the safety. And this is the same thing I think we need to do in the security area. we have, let's say, more attack surface, we have more attacks, but we should obviously work on having less impact in the future and develop our product.
And to put a different angle to that question, as we are investing in defense capabilities, the threat actors are also developing their own capabilities as well. And I typically like to use an example of deep fakes by now that are starting to show up also in attacks based on audio, most likely soon also on video. That's like we will need to somehow defend against. So it's an arms race on both ends, and it will continue that way. There is no perfect security, and whatever we patch or implement, the other side will try to find ways around it, and then it's the same game all over again in a different environment or in a different context.
Yeah, I could not agree more. So maybe a provocative question. I know it's very controversial, right? What about radical new approaches? Like, sometimes there is a discussion on banning cryptocurrency trading because the ransomware payments are typically made in cryptocurrency, or also not permitting companies to pay any ransomware anymore, right? So basically to shut this business model down. Any thoughts on this?
I don't think it's realistic. You can try, but it goes to what's already said, that it's a game that continues evolving. So, okay, you can ban one and then something else is up tomorrow. You can try to legislate this in Europe and then there's a big market in America. So I think we'll need to face that challenge, and we need to admit that we can't legislate our way out of this. Maybe we can reduce the impact some, but legislation is probably not the mean here, in my opinion, because the criminals here are not very interested in legislation anyway, and the only thing that would really impact that is if you're in a desperate situation, see that, okay, I'll follow the legislation because that's something I need to do, but behind the scenes you pay anyway. Because you need to get your data back or whatever it means. So I don't really see that as the way forward, being that deterrent or anything else, Bitcoin or anything else.
Okay.
No, I agree, John. I would probably add that, and you probably touched a little bit on this one, I think a strong relationship between public and public-private partnership in this regard is anyway helpful. But legislation on its own and to try to dry out, let's say, Bitcoin trading and stuff, there will be other ways found, how to make people pay.
Yeah, indeed.
So
and
all the Bitcoin owners are relieved.
Yeah, it depends on where the Bitcoins are coming from, because we've also, thinking of like private-public partnership, we've seen some of the governments cooperate in terms of attribution and trying to shut down some of the more prominent ransomware gangs or some of the threat actors. So I think that might be a way that will help to alleviate, or at least make it more risky to play in that business, and only the more advanced actors, let's say, will then continue to be, but that will at least limit the number of companies that would get hit on a global basis, hopefully. But it's difficult to say what would actually work, and topics of attribution and those kinds of things and legislation have been around for years, and not much has really changed or worked.
Yeah, there's no good solution as far as I know. That's right. Well, Bartek, you already mentioned advanced actors, and Ralf, you mentioned advanced security controls. So I think it's an excellent segue to our next topic, basically, advanced controls. And maybe again we start with a poll from the audience. So again, in your opinion, what are the most relevant advanced protective measures? So thinking of I think now what we call zero trust, right? Before was least privilege access or cloud security, CM, SOC. application whitelisting, third-party risk management, I think was one of the options there. Maybe also from the audience would be interesting, right? Have there been certain situations where you would have wished that you had implemented an advanced solution earlier, right? In hindsight, or where with more experience you realized that some solutions were actually less effective than what you would have expected out of it. So if any example comes to mind or any comments, or please also feel free to use the Q&A box then. So I'm just having a look at the dynamic chart here. So SIEM and SOC, so seems to be top of mind. Zero trust also very high, almost tied. Cloud security less so, and third-party risk management. It's also interesting, right? The third-party risk management is not in the focus. I always think it's interesting, right? The requirement specification towards software and hardware which we buy. So we also brought some data for this one, of course. So SIEM and SOC, yeah, very interesting, right? I think it's actually two of the more expensive solutions, if you have a look, I think, in general, in the total landscape of security controls, although they are becoming more and more affordable. And I think why do they become more affordable, just from, let's say, our point of view, but feel free to chip in also, is I think on the one hand, there is actually a lot of competition by vendors and also managed security service providers in this field. And then there is clearly, there are economies of scale, right, for managed security operations centers by doing this for lots of companies. And then the SIEM solutions, of course, are software as a service, at least to a large extent. So I think also for medium-sized businesses, they're becoming more and more affordable. Yeah, maybe Ralf, starting with you, right? Healthcare industry, SIEM penetration there is expected to grow a lot. Why do you believe this is the case, or any comments from your side on this?
Yeah, if you believe some latest research, healthcare sector and manufacturing are increasingly on the list of adversaries. At least that's what I realized personally also. And the whole sector, not only in Germany under kritis, is more and more seen as a public critical infrastructure. Healthcare goes digital, and on top of that, the whole healthcare sector comprises of a complex ecosystem of private and public organizations, spanning from healthcare goods and services, medical equipment, providing social assistance, pharmaceutical manufacturing, health insurance companies, diagnostics, you name it. And the whole supply chain possesses also highly valuable and very confidential data, very private pieces. And it's itself, the value chain, the supply chain, I mean, is very complex and sometimes even relying on instant delivery. So I made the comment, the advanced measure from yesterday is the new normal and the new baseline of tomorrow, of today. And therefore the SIEM system really helps to monitor the whole value chain and therefore plays a key role in our sector. But SIEM itself as a technical solution obviously is not enough, right? This is exactly why SOC SIEM always need to go hand in hand, as 24/7 is most important. And I can just tell you almost all latest attacks we've seen, especially from ransomware gangs, are done outside of office hours. So we are thinking even of a change of work times for cyber defense centers and move the weekend from Monday to Wednesday.
Interesting. Maybe John, from your point of view, right? How can an organization see, okay, now is the right point in time to consider SIEM and a managed SOC, especially for the 24/7 service, or any indicators there?
Yeah, I think we're touched upon it, and it's about maturity, I would say. So you need to build this brick by brick, and SIEM is something you'll need, but you'll also need the capacity and understanding to operate it. SOC is definitely something you'll need at some point to make sure that you are in control 24/7. We also have an experience, as Ralf has mentioned, with out of office hours attack, and that's becoming more and more normal. So either you staff for 24/7 or you hire in some SOC support to help you out here. But you need to be sufficiently mature. You need to have the right foundation here before you think of these advanced measures.
Bartek, from your point of view, any experience with CMSO?
Overall, I think we've got a bit of an echo, and it's getting better now. Okay. So as mentioned, the SOC is typically kind of defined, or the top piece of a larger puzzle, and there are definitely some considerations regarding to it. You've already mentioned, Jan, is that a lot more MSSPs or small and medium companies are now being able to use those services because the MSSPs made it affordable and actually easier to access. Because historically, typically, a CM platform was an in-house solution managed by the security team, with the SOC team also bolted on top of that. But the outsourced option is now a lot more prominent, and I think a lot more organizations are starting with that first decision, like in-house versus outsourced. And even if in-house, then maybe not all of the SOC functions need to be fully kept in-house. The analysts definitely, but let's say, for example, red teaming could be done by an external party. You don't have to keep those resources in-house to be able to feed those things into your platform. And then kind of on the outsource side, there are very different flavors to it as well. You can kind of go from 24/7 full set of analysts sitting and follow the sun model, so having a couple of locations that make sure that there is that 24/7 coverage. But on the opposite end, you also have some of the solution providers that actually they bolt on a type of a very small SOC or an analyst looking at the alerts coming from, let's say, an EDR, XDR platform as part of a product subscription. So for the smallest organizations, you might even go for something like that, adding more capabilities on the technical side, but also having that additional analyst or someone that can react 24/7 based on the product itself. So the SOC discussions, and I think that the SIEM are quite difficult and very specific to an organization, because there's a lot of different elements that need to be taken into account that needs to fit for a specific requirements or the risk profile, as we were discussing before, to really bring a lot of value rather than just be a way that someone spends some of the security budgets and thinks, oh, like I have a SOC, someone's looking at something 24/7 and then we're secure. But it's not as easy as that.
I think it's an excellent point, Bartek. Maybe from your point of view, right? I'm sure there are people in the audience, because almost every day we are talking to IT managers, and they're considering implementing CM and buying managed SOC services and so on. How should they think about, time to implement this, for the baselining, also to keep it running in a stable mode? And also, how should they think about internal resources, right? Even if they outsource all the monitoring and management, what's the right way to look at this?
The short answer is it depends, because it really depends on the organization. But taking Refresco as an example, we operate as a holding group. So we have business units responsible for each country. So for us, the important part was that interaction point between the local IT and security resources and the central SOC team that has the knowledge, can make the correlations also between business units, see what's going on, but then be able to really support the local business and the local functions to make the necessary remediation changes and things that need to happen beyond the basic blocking of an IP address or deleting the phishing emails. And as mentioned, depending on the needs, you can scale those local resources, but there's definitely a need for someone like a SOC manager to a certain degree. Even if you're outsourcing, that will be that link between the partner and the business. And you can play with the contracts and the vendors to find the right way of interaction, but you definitely need someone to play that role. It's at least from my experience, it never is just a fully managed service by a third party. Even if that's an MDR, so managed detection and response, it will need interfaces into the business. It will need more than just someone from the outside trying to figure out what's going on. Because in many cases, to an outside party, it could be considered a threat, but maybe there is a very specific use case internally that's happening once a quarter that is actually legitimate. And without that local connection, it will be very difficult for them to understand that.
I would totally agree with you, Bartek. I think Yanis asked the question of timing, and I would also like to chime in what Bartek said. I am also not a friend of these concepts to say, okay, you can completely outsource it and you make it a problem of a service provider. This doesn't work because the link between business and these monitoring services needs to be done. It always requires business context in the end, especially when something happens. So at least, let's say, an incident response service. So when really something happens, someone who is managing these kind of contacts, who is the mirror into the internal organization, are absolutely important. Yeah. Without this, I bet this will be a bit of money thrown out of the window, if you want. Yeah. And the question of getting it implemented, as Bartek said, I think it depends. As a rule of thumb, I think setting something up, you probably need some 6 months plus, and then there is a long phase of maturing. So you need to develop use cases. You need to understand the organization. You need to get rid of false positives, false negatives, and all these kind of stuff until this whole thing is stable. And all in all, I would say a good basic maturity you could probably reach after 1.5 years.
Absolutely, also our experience. John, anything from your side, maybe in your experience, or a SOC, CM, anything to add there?
No, I think I concur, of course, and as I mentioned in the beginning here, it's from our perspective, it's a matter of maturity, taking brick by brick, taking this stepwise, and it takes time. And understanding the capacity needed internally and externally is something you understand as you go down the road. I have no trust in going external with all services, because there is something about the internal employees understanding their own company. Either that is business or IT, it needs to be internally anchored. So one way or another, it's going to be a mix. The question is, what is this mix going to be?
Very good. And if I remember correctly, right, when we polled the audience, we asked the audience, right, I think the second highest ranked topic was zero trust. So any thoughts on zero trust? And maybe especially also from my side, any views on zero trust in operations technology, so industrial control systems?
Yeah, if that's a question for me. I find OT and OT security extremely interesting. I think that's coming more and more as OT connects to the real world or the internet. It definitely depends on which industry you're in. We're in the cruise industry, so our OT means OT on board ship. And we're in a situation where OT could be disconnected physically from the internet because of maturity in the industry. But that is about to change. So when OT gets connected and fully connected in the internet, you really need to invest time there as well to set up the right security measures.
I totally agree. I think we are already in this kind of environment. I think we call it Industry 4.0. I believe we are at industry 3.8 or 3.9 in the meantime already. And I know that there's a couple of companies, investing in this field to cloud kind of connectivity. And especially if you go into predictive maintenance and these kind of things, you should more than just think about zero trust kind of approaches. Absolutely.
Just to add on top of that, the OT is also quite challenging in the fact that for the IT environments, a lot of those quick isolation decisions can be made almost automatically. With OT, that would typically mean either a production outage or potential safety issues. So it requires a lot more time and kind of thinking through also with different stakeholders like engineering, business, on how should the systems react, how should they communicate, what are the fallback scenarios in case of any potential events, because the consequences are a lot more severe. So in my experience, those OT related, like whether that's zero trust or applying a Purdue model on the architecture, like just take significantly more time and effort than what we're used to on the IT side. And because of that kind of interconnectedness and the consequences that the OT systems typically have.
Okay, so lots of more that I would like to ask you, but I think we'll move on to questions from the audience. Also very interesting. So Q&A. So since employee awareness is top priority, so I'm reading a card here, so we are fully digital here. So which top practices do I need to share with my employees? So I start with you, Ralf. So which top practices should I share with my employees?
Sorry, what was the question? What top practices you should share with employees?
Yes, since employee awareness is top priority.
Yeah, I mean, well, obviously starting, and I think we had that, making things visible. I'm a total friend of, what gets measured gets done. You can, with regards to employee awareness, for instance, if you start with, I think the typical phishing contests is probably a good starting point. The good thing is also you can measure it, and you can also show very nicely, that you always will have somebody who is clicking. The second advice I probably would have is develop what is the key behaviors you want your employees to inhale. And if you wake them up in the night at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you ask them what is your key behavior, they should know it. I think a good set of, 5, 6, 7 key behaviors. This is absolutely crucial.
Cool.
To just add on that, because what I've also seen in the past, like some behavior. So let's take that phishing aspect or strong passwords or like password hygiene. Depending on the organization and potentially if there were different breaches in the past, some of those behaviors are already kind of well ingrained, and maybe there was a pizza delivery guy that looked at a password that was posted on a screen. So that clear desk policy has been enforced and hammered into the organization for years. But maybe that phishing aspect or vishing, smishing is something that those guys never heard of. So also starting that awareness program with a bit of understanding, whether that's a quick survey through a representative sample of the organization or just discussions, like which behaviors should we focus on? Like what are either key risk or the thing that we believe is the biggest risk, and kind of pushing the program towards that angle, because otherwise you might get the comments, oh, I've seen those things in the past. Of course, I know I'm not supposed to click on a suspicious link. So tailoring that to an individual organization and the needs rather than just taking a program out of the internet and just kind of sharing that as is would typically have a much better adoption rate.
Yeah, I guess I'm not supposed to tell you this, but at Bosch we also somehow found operators using our machines to play computer games. I don't know how they managed to do this too. So on the shop floor, right? But
yeah, users are very creative.
Exactly. Yeah. So next question. So CM apparently some members of our audience are very interested in this. Any advice on how should the implementation be approached, right? Any hints, practical tips or so, maybe anecdotes which you can share, or mistakes which others should avoid?
Yeah, I can start, and the guys can chip in. But from my experience, if let's say we're talking about the SIEM platform, so kind of that first step, understanding kind of what the use cases are and the logs required to make those use cases work would be the first step. On one hand, because all of the vendors will typically ask what's the events per second or the amount of logs being generated, but at the end of the day, if you have a couple of things in mind that you know the SIEM should do initially, because it's, as Rolf mentioned, it will be a long process. So you won't onboard everything at the same time. But like each time you will add some additional log sources or files, there might be some false positives, some stabilization phase. So understanding the journey of what kind of logs, what kind of use cases do I need to have, and then kind of making a realistic roadmap out of that would be my initial advice if someone is at that early stage as of now.
I can add something as well, and I think we're on to it. And it's for CM, it's quite easy to go too big too fast. And if you go too big too fast, you end up with losing control. So really understanding the pace that you're able to consume the service and understand the service and adapt it into your organization is key. Understanding why are we prioritizing this area? Is this due to a risk scenario that we're prioritizing monitoring and follow up with this area, or is it due to something else? How good is the involvement from the business? Is this something we do because we find it fun to have a complete monitoring, or is this something we do to make sure that the business is stable and that we monitor the right things? So it's, I think it's important to take this gradually and to understand what you're doing and take a step back every now and a while to see that you're moving in the right direction.
I like that, John. Yeah, probably the starting point is maybe the most difficult piece. If I just look back, I mean, still, I believe a lot of adversaries, and I think we need to look at it from an adversary point of view, from our attackers, from our threat actors. They try to find a way into our networks. Obviously, laterally move, so they leave traces, and then they try to get to their ultimate target. So if it's ransomware, for instance, still very prone to work, is using the AD. So every use case around the AD as the center of gravity for building damage, I think is probably a good advice. And also the outside framework, you know, like VPN logs and correlating them, and these kind of things, and then the very prone to be attacked kind of ways like RDP, SMBV1, and all these kind of things. What those gangs use, I think this is probably a good starting point. And then, as John said, you know, always take a step back, think of, you know, am I just overdoing, and is that still the right way? And the last advice is probably, if you really understand where your crown jewels are, your high business impact kind of systems, and I don't know, you have any log source in front of them, probably you want to see them in the SIEM and correlate and have a look if somebody is touching them, because that's what you don't want.
There's another comment from the audience, basically, which says, okay, the challenge is actually not to avoid being hacked, but then to recover quickly, right? Any thoughts, any ideas?
Oh yeah, I think I can sing some songs about this one, we say. I think this is exactly the point. I mean, if you start your cybersecurity journey, I think the first step, what you should do is kind of, let me call it, get clean. And you should clean up, let's say, all the weaknesses and try to understand and focus, obviously, on your crown jewels. And then really to start understanding what you have and what is most important. And then you try to stay healthy, yeah? Because that is basically what you need to do, as there's new weaknesses, there's new vulnerabilities and stuff like this. So you need to take care of this one. And as there will be events, this is a very good question. You also need to take care that you heal fast. And obviously, I mean, with regards to ransomware attacks and things like that, there's, I mean, you can read it from the internet and the books and stuff like this. Business continuity management, and it starts with a good backup, full stop. Yeah, and you should also have partners in place so that if you have an event, you have somebody who can help you, who has some hands, who can, I don't know, reset up laptops if they are encrypted, who can manage to reset up servers and services based on backups and stuff like this. But also, and this is, I think, the job of the CISO of our days, is really taking care that we do understand our most important parts of the value chain, and talk to the business that they can work with pen and paper, and or that they do put some concepts in place to survive some unavailability of IT or OT. Very good question.
I completely agree, and I find it a bit dangerous to focus too much on the recovery time, because there are so many scenarios in there where recovery time is just a minor thing. You can lose data which is valuable to you. You can have a situation where you need to pursue other legal actions due to the fact that you have lost data or you've been put in a situation. So exercising training on pen on paper, I think that's an advice that you shouldn't ignore that basic fact that at a certain point you might need just pen and paper to operate. And how would that go? And that goes back to risk management again. It might be that case for a week or two or more because things take time. But yeah, let's make sure that you don't stop focusing on isolating your crown jewels just because you're fast at recovering.
Yeah, I fully agree with what was said already. And one thing I've seen work quite well in the past was to actually run those cyber simulations, cyber war games at different levels. So to have that kind of the simulation, the discussion at the board level with the IT department, with some of the business functions, just to, on one hand, make sure that they understand the business continuity, the incident response procedures that are in place, and actually lived through that, at least in a simulated environment. But also typically that opens up quite a lot of eyes to say, oh, like I didn't think of that, and what would we do if the scenario went that way? So it starts that discussion that people quite often themselves realize, like we need to have that pen and paper procedure, or we need to have a backup scenario for that specific angle. So that is something that like brings that awareness that it's not just an IT backup element that like someone will come in and bring back everything online, but that they also need to be involved and need to be prepared for it.
Excellent. Thank you very much already. And in the audience also, thanks a lot for your questions. And in case we didn't have a chance to ask them now, we will try to answer them later via email or also from our speakers. But the great thing is the fun continues now, because now we'll move on to our fireside chats. So we'll use a different platform. We'll move on to Microsoft Teams for this. And in those informal fireside chats, you will actually have the possibility to directly ask the questions to our guest speakers, so not via me. And then we hope we have a very good discussion there. So to join, just click the link below the speaker's bio, which you should be able to see now if you scroll down. And if there are any problems, just let us know. So with this, I think, yeah, we'll see each other in a few minutes. And thanks again.